I was standing in my driveway, admiring the fresh coat of stain on my workshop, when Barbara Henderson marched across the street with her phone held high like she was documenting evidence of a murder scene. The workshop had taken me 3 weekends to build, measuring exactly 119 square feet of perfectly legal structure according to Riverside County regulations. I checked the codes twice, measured 3 times, and even called the planning department to confirm I didn't need a permit for anything under 120 square feet. Everything was by the book. "You can't just build whatever you want, Aaron," Barbara said, stopping at the edge of my property line like there was an invisible force field. Her orange visor matched her overly tanned skin, and her white tennis outfit looked fresh from the country club. "This is a violation of our community standards." I wiped my hands on my jeans and tried to keep my voice level. "It's not a violation of anything. The structure is under the square footage limit that requires permits. I measured it myself. The HOA covenant clearly states that any outbuilding requires approval from the Architectural Review Committee." She tapped her phone screen aggressively. "I'm documenting this for the board meeting." My neighbor Tom leaned over the fence separating our yards. He'd lived in this Murrieta subdivision for 15 years, 5 years longer than me. "Barbara, the man built a shed. Half the neighborhood has sheds." "Those were approved," Barbara snapped without looking at him. "This was not. Rules exist for a reason." I'd moved to this neighborhood in Murrieta, California, 3 years ago after my divorce. The house was perfect for a fresh start, the price was right, and I'd thought the HOA would be manageable. For the most part, it had been, until Barbara Henderson got elected as HOA president 6 months ago. Since then, she'd been on a crusade to enforce every minor rule with the enthusiasm of someone who'd finally found their life's calling. "I'll bring it up at the next board meeting," I said, trying to be diplomatic. "But I'm confident it meets all legal requirements." "You should have brought it up before you built it." Barbara took another photo. "I'm calling code enforcement tomorrow morning. We'll see what they have to say about your little project." She turned on her heel and marched back across the street to her pristine 2-story house with its geometrically perfect lawn and precisely trimmed hedges. I'd never seen a single leaf out of place in her yard. Tom shook his head. "That woman has too much time on her hands." "It's fine," I said, though my stomach had tightened into a knot. "I know I'm in the right. The workshop was my sanctuary. After working as an electrical engineer for 40 hours a week, staring at computer screens and sitting in meetings, I needed space to work with my hands. The workshop was where I built furniture, fixed things, and generally decompressed from life. I designed it to be functional but attractive, with cedar siding that matched my house and a small window on the side for natural light. That evening, I pulled out all my documentation. The Riverside County building codes clearly stated that accessory structures under 120 square feet didn't require building permits. I'd measured my workshop at exactly 119 square feet, leaving that crucial 1-foot buffer. I'd also reviewed the HOA covenants when I first moved in, and while they mentioned that major modifications needed approval, the definition of major was vague enough that a small workshop should fall into a gray area at worst. I called my friend Derek, who was a real estate attorney in Temecula. We'd met at a bar trivia night 2 years ago and had stayed friends ever since. "Aaron, hey," Derek answered on the second ring. "What's up?" I explained the situation while pacing around my living room. Through the window, I could see the workshop in my backyard, looking innocent and perfectly legal. "So she's calling code enforcement?" Derek asked. "That's what she threatened." "Well, if you're under the square footage limit and you've got documentation, you're fine." Code enforcement will come out, measure it, and tell her there's nothing they can do." He paused. "The HOA thing is trickier. They can make your life difficult even if you're not breaking any actual laws." "Great," I muttered. "Document everything. Keep copies of all communications. If she starts fining you or taking action, we can fight it, but you'll want a paper trail." After hanging up, I created a folder on my computer labeled Workshop Documentation and started scanning everything. Measurements, photos from the construction process, copies of the county codes, the HOA covenants with relevant sections highlighted. If Barbara wanted a fight, I'd be prepared. The next morning was Tuesday, and I had back-to-back meetings at work. I barely thought about the workshop situation until my phone rang at 2 in the afternoon. Unknown number with a local area code. "This is Aaron," I answered. "Mr. Turner. This is Miguel Rodriguez from Riverside County Code Enforcement. We received a complaint about an unpermitted structure at your residence." My mouth went dry. "I see. I'd like to schedule a time to come out and take a look. Would Thursday morning work for you? Thursday was only 2 days away." "What time? How's 10 o'clock? I'll need to take off work, but yes, I can make that work." "Great. Just to give you a heads up, I'll be checking the structure for code compliance, measuring square footage and verifying whether a permit was required. If everything is in order, we'll close the complaint." "It is in order," I said. "I measured it specifically to stay under the permit threshold. We'll verify that on Thursday. See you then, Mr. Turner." I immediately emailed my boss requesting Thursday morning off for a home emergency, which wasn't technically a lie. Then I texted Tom to let him know what was happening. Tom responded within minutes. "Want me to be there? Witness." I appreciated the offer. "That would be great, actually." That evening, I spent 2 hours in the workshop organizing my tools and making sure everything looked as professional as possible. Not that it mattered for code compliance, but I wanted to show that this was a legitimate structure built with care, not some slapped-together eyesore. Wednesday dragged. Every hour felt like 3. I kept checking my phone, half expecting another call from code enforcement or a nasty email from Barbara. Nothing came, which somehow made it worse. Thursday morning arrived with clear skies and unseasonable warmth for March in Southern California. I was standing in my driveway at 9:30, coffee in hand, when Tom came out of his house. "Ready for the inspection?" he asked. "As ready as I'll ever be." At exactly 10 o'clock, a white truck with Riverside County Code Enforcement printed on the side pulled up to my curb. A man in his 40s stepped out carrying a tablet and a measuring tape. Miguel Rodriguez had a professional demeanor and a weathered face that suggested years of working outdoors. "Mr. Turner," he extended his hand. "That's me. This is my neighbor Tom. He's here as a witness." Miguel nodded at Tom, then looked toward my backyard. "Let's take a look at this workshop." We walked around the side of the house. Miguel stopped when the workshop came into view, setting down his tablet and pulling out the measuring tape. "Nice construction," he said, which I took as a good sign. "You build this yourself?" "Yes, sir. Took me 3 weekends." He walked the perimeter, measuring each side carefully and writing down numbers on his tablet. I watched in silence, my heart pounding despite knowing I was in the right. Tom stood beside me with his arms crossed. "Okay," Miguel said after several minutes. "I'm getting measurements of 10 feet by 11.9 feet. That's 119 square feet." "Exactly what I measured," I said. He nodded slowly. "And you're aware that structures under 120 square feet don't require a building permit in Riverside County?" "Yes. That's why I built it to this size." Miguel walked around the workshop again, checking the foundation, the walls, the roof. He took photos from multiple angles. Finally, He returned to where Tom and I were standing. "Mr. Turner, this is a well-built structure that meets code requirements and doesn't require a permit. I'll be closing this complaint as unfounded." He typed something on his tablet. "You should receive a letter in the mail within a week confirming that." Relief washed over me. "Thank you. Can I ask who filed the complaint?" Tom interjected. Miguel glanced at him. "Complaints are anonymous, but typically in cases like this, it's a neighbor or HOA. He looked at me. "Speaking of which, you might want to check your HOA rules. Sometimes they have their own requirements separate from county code." "I've reviewed them," I said. "There's nothing specific about structures this size." "Then you should be fine." Miguel headed back toward his truck. "Have a good day, gentlemen." After he left, Tom clapped me on the shoulder. "Told you Barbara was full of it." "Yeah, but this isn't over. She's going to try something else." I was right. That evening, I found a letter in my mailbox on HOA letterhead. The message was brief and threatening. "Dear Mr. Turner, it has come to the attention of the Architectural Review Committee that you have constructed an unpermitted outbuilding on your property. This is a violation of Section 7.3 of the HOA covenants, which requires all exterior modifications to be approved before construction begins. You are hereby fined $500 and required to submit plans for review within 30 days or remove the structure. Failure to comply will result in additional fines of $100 per day. Sincerely, Barbara Henderson, HOA President." I read the letter 3 times, my anger building with each read. $500, $100 per day after that. For a completely legal structure that I'd built on my own property, I called Derek immediately. "They can't do this, can they?" I asked after reading him the letter. "Well, that depends on what the covenant actually says. Can you send me a copy?" I scanned the HOA documents and emailed them while we were still on the phone. I could hear Derek typing and clicking as he reviewed them. "Okay, here's the thing," Derek said after a few minutes. "Section 7.3 does say that exterior modifications require approval, but the language is pretty vague. It doesn't define what constitutes a modification that needs approval versus routine maintenance or minor additions. So I might have to pay the fine." "No, hold on. There's case law in California about HOA covenants and reasonable restrictions. If the covenant is too vague to be enforceable, or if it's being applied in a discriminatory way, you can fight it." He paused. "Are there other sheds or workshops in the neighborhood?" "At least a dozen that I can think of." "Were they all approved by the Architectural Review Committee?" "I doubt it. Most of them were here when I moved in." "That's your argument then. Selective enforcement. If they're fining you but not others, they're discriminating. Also, an accessory structure under 120 square feet is pretty standard. A reasonable person would not interpret that as requiring committee approval." "So what do I do?" "Write a response letter. Cite the vagueness of the covenant, mention the other structures in the neighborhood, and reference the county code enforcement inspection. Tell them you're not paying the fine and you're not removing the structure. Be professional but firm. And if they keep fining me, then we take it to court if necessary. But most HOAs will back down when they realize someone's willing to fight. Legal fees get expensive for them too." I spent that evening crafting a response letter. I must have rewritten it 10 times, trying to strike the right balance between assertive and professional. Finally, I had something I was satisfied with. "Dear Miss Henderson and the Architectural Review Committee, I am writing in response to your letter dated March 16, 2025, regarding the workshop structure on my property. I respectfully dispute the fine and the characterization of this structure as a violation. First, the workshop is 119 square feet, which is under the threshold requiring a building permit per Riverside County Code. This was verified by County Code Enforcement Inspector Miguel Rodriguez on March 15, 2025. Second, Section 7.3 of the HOA Covenant does not specifically define what exterior modifications require approval. A reasonable interpretation would not include accessory structures under the legal permit threshold. Third, numerous similar structures exist throughout the neighborhood, and I am not aware that all of them received committee approval. Selective enforcement of covenants is not permitted under California law. I will not be paying the fine, submitting plans for review, or removing the structure. If you believe you have legal grounds to enforce this fine, I invite you to pursue formal legal action, at which point I will be represented by counsel. Sincerely, Aaron Turner. I printed it, signed it, and put it in an envelope addressed to the HOA. I drop it off at Barbara's house tomorrow after work. Friday afternoon, I drove home with the letter on my passenger seat. Barbara's house looked empty when I pulled into my driveway, but her car was parked in front. I walked across the street and rang the doorbell. Barbara answered wearing yoga pants and a tight athletic top, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her expression soured when she saw me. Aaron. I have a response to the HOA letter. I held out the envelope. She took it without opening it. You're just making this harder on yourself. Pay the fine, submit your plans, and we can move forward. The structure is legal. Code enforcement already cleared it. Code enforcement doesn't dictate HOA rules. Her voice was sharp. I don't know why you're being so difficult about this. Everyone else in the neighborhood follows the rules. Do they? Because I count at least 12 other sheds and workshops that I'm pretty sure weren't approved. Those are grandfathered in. Really? Because the Johnsons built their shed 2 years ago, was that approved? Barbara's jaw tightened. I don't have time for this. Read my letter. Either comply or face the consequences. She closed the door in my face. I walked back to my house, my hands shaking with anger. Tom was in his driveway washing his car. How'd it go? He called. About as well as you'd expect. Over the weekend, I tried to focus on other things. I met some friends for lunch Saturday, went hiking in the Santa Rosa Plateau on Sunday, and generally tried not to obsess over the HOA situation. But it was always there in the back of my mind, a constant low-level stress. Monday evening, I got an email from Barbara. The subject line read, HOA violation final notice. Mr. Turner, your response to the Architectural Review Committee has been reviewed and rejected. The fine stands at $500 plus $100 per day starting March 23, 2025. If the fine is not paid and the structure not removed or approved within 30 days, we will pursue legal action to place a lien on your property. Additionally, you are now in violation of Section 12.1 for failing to maintain community standards. An additional fine of $250 has been assessed. Total fines, $750. Payment is due within 15 days. Barbara Henderson, HOA President. I stared at the email in disbelief. Section 12.1 was about maintaining property appearance. My property was immaculate. I just re-landscaped 6 months ago. This was pure retaliation. I forwarded the email to Derek with the message, "This is getting out of hand." He called me within the hour. "Okay, this is actually good for your case." "How is this good?" "Because she's clearly retaliating. The Section 12.1 violation is obviously bogus, and any judge will see that. She's making this personal, which weakens her position." Derek's voice was calm and confident. "Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to send a letter to the HOA on legal letterhead. It'll cite California Civil Code sections related to HOA enforcement, warn them about selective enforcement and retaliation, and put them on notice that we're prepared to pursue legal action if necessary. How much is this going to cost me? For the letter, $200. If it goes to court, we're looking at a few thousand minimum. But honestly, I don't think it'll get that far. Most HOAs have insurance and legal counsel who will tell them they are on shaky ground. Okay, do it. Derek's letter went out Wednesday. By Friday, I hadn't heard anything from the HOA, which I took as a good sign. Maybe they were backing down. I was wrong. Saturday morning, I woke to the sound of yelling. I pulled on a t-shirt and sweatpants and went outside to find Barbara in my driveway with a man I didn't recognize. He was wearing a polo shirt with Henderson Construction embroidered on it. Barbara's husband, I realized. You can't just threaten my wife with legal action. He was shouting before I'd even fully opened the door. Robert Henderson was a big man, probably 6'2" and 200 pounds, with a red face and aggressive posture. I didn't threaten anyone, I said calmly. I responded to an unfair fine through my attorney. You're making this into a bigger deal than it needs to be. Robert stepped closer. Just pay the damn fine and get your shed approved. Why is that so hard? Because the shed is legal and doesn't need approval. It's not about what's legal with the county. It's about what the HOA requires. Tom came out of his house. Everything okay over here? Mind your own business, Tom, Barbara snapped. Actually, this is getting pretty loud. I think it is my business. I noticed other neighbors starting to emerge. The Patel family across the street, the young couple 2 doors down, Mrs. Chen from the corner house. Everyone was watching the confrontation. Look, I said, trying to de-escalate, I understand you disagree with my position, but I'm not going to be bullied into paying fines I don't know. If you want to take this to court, we can do that through our lawyers. Maybe I don't need lawyers, Robert said, taking another step toward me. Maybe I just need to take care of this myself. Robert, stop, Barbara said, grabbing his arm. Tom moved to stand beside me. I think you two should leave now. For a long moment, Robert just stared at me, his face crimson. Then he shook off Barbara's hand and turned back to their house. Barbara followed, but not before giving me a look that could have melted steel. That was intense, Tom said after they'd gone. Yeah, my heart was racing. Did he just threaten me? Sure sounded like it. I went inside and immediately wrote down everything that had happened while it was fresh in my mind. Then I called Derek. He said, "What?" Derek's voice was sharp. He said maybe he'd take care of it himself. It felt like a threat. That's incredibly stupid on his part. Document everything. If he comes back, call the police. Derek paused. This is escalating in a weird way. Most HOA disputes don't get physical threats. Barbara's taking it personally, and apparently her husband is backing her play. Okay, we might need to consider a restraining order if he makes any more threats. For now, just stay away from them and document everything. The rest of the weekend passed without incident, but I felt constantly on edge. Every time a car door slammed or I heard voices outside, I looked out the window expecting to see Robert Henderson. Monday at work was a blur. I couldn't focus on anything. My project manager noticed during our afternoon meeting. "Aaron, you okay? You seem distracted." "Just some stuff going on at home. Sorry." "Everything all right? HOA dispute. It's fine." But it wasn't fine. That evening, I came home to find that someone had spray-painted "Remove IT" in red letters across the side of my workshop. The paint was still wet, dripping down the cedar siding I'd so carefully stained. I called the police immediately. 2 officers from the Murrieta Police Department arrived within 20 minutes. Officer Sarah Martinez and Officer David Kim took photos of the graffiti and asked me questions about who might have done it. I can't prove it, I said, but I'm in a dispute with my HOA president. Her husband made what I interpreted as a threat on Saturday. What kind of threat? Officer Martinez asked, pen poised over her notepad. I recounted the entire confrontation. She wrote everything down, asking clarifying questions about specific words and gestures. We'll talk to the Hendersons, Officer Kim said. Do you have any security cameras? No, I don't. Might want to consider getting some. If this is an ongoing dispute, having video evidence could be helpful. After the officers left to talk to Barbara and Robert, I called Derek again. File a police report and send me a copy, he said. This is beyond just an HOA dispute now. This is property damage and potentially criminal intimidation. The cops are talking to them now. Good. Let me know what happens. An hour later, Officer Martinez returned alone. We spoke with Mr. and Mrs. Henderson. They both deny any involvement in the vandalism and claim they were at a dinner party until 9 o'clock tonight. We got the address of the party to verify their alibi. So that's it. Without proof, there's not much we can do. But we did inform them that any further contact with you could be considered harassment, especially given the threat Mr. Henderson made on Saturday. She handed me a card. Call us immediately if anything else happens. After she left, I stood in my backyard staring at the ruined workshop. The red paint stood out like a wound against the cedar. I'd spent hours staining that siding, making it perfect. Now it was destroyed. Tom came through the side gate. Holy hell, I just heard. You call the cops, just left. This is crazy. Who does something like this? Someone who really wants me to get rid of my workshop. You going to? I looked at Tom, then back at the vandalized building. No, absolutely not. The next morning, I took the day off work and drove to Home Depot. I bought an outdoor security camera system with 4 cameras, a motion sensor floodlight, and materials to repair the workshop siding. Then I spent the entire day installing everything. 2 cameras covered the workshop from different angles. 1 covered my driveway, and 1 covered the backyard entrance. All of them fed to an app on my phone with cloud storage. I also bought paint stripper and spent 3 hours removing the spray paint. It didn't come off perfectly, but I managed to get most of it. I'd need to restain that whole panel, but at least the red letters were gone. Derek's formal response to the HOA went out that afternoon. It was a strongly worded letter that basically said any further enforcement action would result in a lawsuit for selective enforcement, harassment, and retaliation. He also mentioned the vandalism and suggested that if the HOA continued their campaign, we might pursue criminal charges as well. Wednesday brought a response from the HOA, but it wasn't from Barbara. Instead, it came from a law firm in Riverside representing the HOA. Dear Mr. Turner and Counsel, we represent the Creekside Meadows Homeowners Association. It has come to our attention that there is a dispute regarding an accessory structure on your property. Our client is willing to resolve this matter amicably. If you agree to submit plans for architectural review, the HOA will waive all existing fines pending the review process. If the committee approves your workshop design, no further action will be taken. This offer expires in 7 days. Sincerely, Patricia Gomez, attorney at law. I forwarded it to Derek. Thoughts? He called me an hour later. It's a face-saving move. They realize they're on weak legal ground, but Barbara doesn't want to back down completely. If you submit the plans and they approve them, she can claim she was just enforcing the process. And if they reject the plans, then we're back where we started, except you'll have documentation that you tried to work with them in good faith. So should I do it? That's up to you. Personally, I think you could win if we go to court, but court is expensive and time-consuming. If submitting some plans and getting a rubber stamp approval ends this, it might be worth it. I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted to fight this on principle, but another part just wanted the stress to end. I had security cameras now. I had documentation. If they rejected reasonable plans, I'd have even more evidence of harassment. I'll do it, I said finally, but I'm submitting exactly what I built, no changes. That's fair. I spent that evening creating a simple architectural drawing of the workshop. Dimensions, materials, foundation details, roof pitch, everything. I included photos of the finished structure. It was more than adequate for a 119-square-foot workshop. I submitted the plans through the HOA portal on Thursday morning. The automated response said I'd hear back within 30 days. For a week, nothing happened. No emails from Barbara, no letters from lawyers, no vandalism. I started to relax, thinking maybe this was actually over. Then I got a call from Tom on a Tuesday evening. "Aaron, you need to check the HOA portal, like right now." I pulled up the website on my laptop. There was a new message waiting. "Your architectural review has been rejected. Reason: the proposed structure does not meet community aesthetic standards. The cedar siding color is too dark and creates visual discord with neighboring properties. Please submit revised plans with lighter staining or painted siding in an approved color. Resubmission fee, $250. I called Derek immediately, not even bothering to read the rest of the rejection letter. They rejected it because the stain is too dark. I was almost shouting. "Are you kidding me right now? Okay, slow down. What exactly does it say?" I read him the entire rejection letter, including the list of approved colors that I'd supposedly need to use. The list included colors like sandstone beige and desert cream and sage whisper. "My house is cedar-sided," I said. "The workshop matches my house." That was the entire point. "And other houses in the neighborhood have cedar siding, at least a third of them." Derek was quiet for a moment. "Okay, this is good actually." "How is any of this good?" "Because now they're clearly being unreasonable. No judge is going to look at this and think requiring you to paint a workshop that matches your house is a legitimate architectural concern." His voice was confident. "We're done playing nice. I'm filing a lawsuit tomorrow. Against the HOA. Against the HOA and Barbara Henderson personally for harassment. We're going to argue selective enforcement, retaliation, violation of your property rights, and infliction of emotional distress. We'll also mention the vandalism and Robert Henderson's threats." My stomach churned. This is really happening. It's really happening. "But Aaron, you're going to win this. I'm confident." The lawsuit was filed on March 29, 2025 in Riverside County Superior Court. Derek had prepared a comprehensive complaint that laid out everything: the legal construction of the workshop, the county code enforcement inspection, the escalating fines, the threats, the vandalism, and the unreasonable rejection of my architectural plans. He was asking for an injunction preventing the HOA from enforcing the fines, monetary damages, and attorney fees. The HOA had 30 days to respond. In the meantime, life continued. I went to work. I used my workshop, and I monitored my security cameras obsessively. Nothing unusual happened, but I felt like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. The response came from Patricia Gomez on April 15th. The HOA denied all allegations and claimed they were simply enforcing their covenants in good faith. They filed a motion to dismiss, based on the argument that I'd failed to exhaust the HOA's internal appeal process before suing. Derek countered that there was no point in exhausting an internal process that was clearly biased against me, and that the vandalism and threats elevated this beyond a simple covenant dispute. The judge scheduled a hearing for May 2nd. Those 2 weeks were some of the longest of my life. Derek prepared me for what to expect in court, but I couldn't shake my nervousness. I'd never sued anyone before. I'd never been in a courtroom except for jury duty. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept rehearsing what I might say, how I'd explain everything to the judge. Derek had told me I probably wouldn't need to testify at this preliminary hearing, but I wanted to be prepared. The Riverside County Courthouse was an imposing modern building downtown. Derek met me outside at 8:30 in the morning. He was wearing a sharp suit and carrying a leather briefcase. "You ready?" he asked. "As ready as I'll ever be." Inside, we went through security and made our way to Department 4 on the 3rd floor. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with maybe 20 seats for spectators. Barbara and Robert Henderson were already there, sitting with Patricia Gomez and another lawyer I didn't recognize. Barbara glared at me when I walked in. Robert just stared straight ahead. Judge Linda Chen took the bench at 9 o'clock sharp. She was a woman in her 50s with black hair pulled back in a bun and a no-nonsense expression. "Good morning. We're here for Turner versus Creekside Meadows HOA in Henderson. I've reviewed the complaint and the motion to dismiss. Miss Gomez, you may proceed." Patricia Gomez stood and launched into her argument about why the case should be dismissed. She spoke confidently about HOA law and internal procedures, and the business judgment rule that gave HOAs discretion in enforcing their covenants. Then Derek stood for our side. "Your Honor, this case is not about whether HOAs can enforce their covenants. It's about whether an HOA can use those covenants as a weapon to harass a homeowner who built a completely legal structure." He walked through the timeline, emphasizing the county inspection, the escalating fines, the threats, and the vandalism. My client tried to work with the HOA in good faith. He submitted architectural plans as requested. Those plans were rejected for pretextual reasons that have nothing to do with legitimate community standards. Judge Chen listened carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When both sides had finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Here's what I see," she said. "Mr. Turner built a structure that's legal under county code. The HOA claims it violates their covenants, but the covenant language is arguably vague. Mr. Turner attempted to work with the HOA by submitting plans, which were rejected for reasons that appear arbitrary." She looked at Patricia Gomez. "Counsel, can you explain why a cedar workshop that matches the house is unacceptable when the neighborhood has numerous cedar-sided houses?" Patricia hesitated. "Your Honor, the Architectural Review Committee has discretion to determine what meets community standards." "That doesn't answer my question. Do you have any objective standard for what colors are acceptable?" "The committee evaluates each application on a case-by-case basis." "That sounds like arbitrary discretion to me." Judge Chen made a note. "I'm denying the motion to dismiss. This case will proceed. I'm also going to issue a preliminary injunction preventing the HOA from assessing any additional fines pending resolution of this matter." She looked at Derek. "Counselor, as for the claims against Mrs. Henderson personally, I'll need to see more evidence before I rule on those. The vandalism is concerning, but there's no proof linking it to the defendants." "Understood, Your Honor. We'll schedule a full hearing for June 15th. Both parties should be prepared to present evidence and testimony." She banged her gavel. "We're adjourned." As we filed out of the courtroom, I felt a mixture of relief and continued anxiety. We'd won this round, but the case was far from over. In the hallway, Robert Henderson grabbed my arm. This is ridiculous. You're costing the HOA thousands in legal fees over a stupid shed. Let go of me, I said quietly. Derek stepped between us. Mr. Henderson, do not touch my client. We'll see you at the next hearing. Security had noticed the confrontation and was heading our way. Robert released my arm and walked away with Barbara and their attorneys. That was stupid of him, Derek muttered. Please tell me you got that on video. I hadn't, but a courthouse security camera might have. Derek made a note to request that footage. Over the next 6 weeks, Derek subpoenaed records from the HOA showing all architectural review applications for the past 5 years. He also deposed Barbara and 2 other HOA board members. I didn't sit in on the depositions, but Derek told me they went well for our side. Barbara basically admitted that she thought you should have asked permission before building anything, Derek explained over the phone. But when I asked her to show me the specific covenant language requiring that, she couldn't. She just kept saying it was common sense and community standards. So we're good. We're very good. She also admitted that at least 8 other workshops and sheds in the neighborhood were never submitted for architectural review, and the HOA never pursued enforcement action against those homeowners. Selective enforcement. Exactly. As the June 15th hearing approached, Derek's confidence grew. The evidence was overwhelmingly in our favor. The HOA had no consistent enforcement policy, the covenant language was vague, and my workshop was completely legal under county codes. The week before the hearing, something unexpected happened. Patricia Gomez called Derek with a settlement offer. They want to settle, Derek told me. Full dismissal of all fines, formal approval of your workshop as is, and they'll pay $20,000 toward your attorney fees. $20,000. I did quick math in my head. Derek's fees were probably going to hit $30,000 or $35,000 by the time this was done. It's not full fees, but it's something. More importantly, you get to keep your workshop and you don't have to worry about the HOA anymore. What about Barbara? The settlement would include a provision that she can't take any further action related to your workshop or initiate any enforcement actions against you without cause. If she does, you can take her back to court and the HOA will be on the hook for your legal fees. I thought about it. $20,000 wouldn't cover all my costs, but continuing to fight would just rack up more fees with no guarantee of getting more. And really, all I'd wanted from the beginning was to keep my workshop and be left alone. What do you think I should do? Take the settlement, Derek said without hesitation. You won. This is them admitting they were wrong. Take the win. I agreed to the settlement on June 10th. The HOA board ratified it at an emergency meeting on June 12th. By June 13th, all the paperwork was signed and filed with the court. I thought that was the end of it. But on June 14th, the night before what would have been our hearing, my security cameras caught something interesting. At 2:15 in the morning, a figure in dark clothes approached my workshop carrying what looked like a spray paint can. The motion-activated floodlight kicked on, illuminating the person clearly. It was Robert Henderson. He froze in the light, looking directly at the camera, then turned and ran. I called the police immediately and sent them the video footage. Officers Martinez and Kim returned to my house within an hour. That's very clear footage, Officer Martinez said, watching the video on my phone. That's definitely Mr. Henderson. Can you arrest him? We'll go talk to him now. Given that there was a prior vandalism incident, and this appears to be an attempted repeat, yes, we'll probably arrest him. I went back to bed but couldn't sleep. Around 4 in the morning, I checked the local arrest records online. Robert Henderson had been booked into Riverside County Jail on charges of attempted vandalism and trespassing. I called Derek first thing in the morning. No way, he said when I told him. He actually came back, got him on video clear as day. "Aaron, this is huge." This proves the first vandalism was probably him too. The settlement is already signed, but we might be able to add damages for the emotional distress this has caused. I don't want more legal battles. I just want this to be over. Understood, but keep that footage. If he makes bail and tries anything else, you've got a pattern of behavior documented. Robert Henderson was arraigned the next day and released on $5,000 bail. The criminal case would proceed separately from our civil settlement. I didn't have to be involved unless they needed me to testify. The settlement money hit my account on June 20th. $20,000. It didn't cover all my legal fees, but it was something. More importantly, I had a signed document stating that my workshop was approved, and the HOA couldn't take any further action against it. Barbara Henderson resigned as HOA president on June 25th. According to Tom, who heard it from another neighbor, the rest of the board had forced her out after the lawsuit settlement. Apparently, the HOA's insurance had covered most of the legal costs, but the board was furious that she'd let things escalate so far over something so petty. A new HOA president was elected in July, a retired teacher named Patricia Wilson who lived 2 streets over. She sent a letter to all homeowners apologizing for the previous administration's actions and promising a more reasonable approach to covenant enforcement going forward. Robert Henderson's criminal case dragged through the courts over the summer. I gave a deposition in August about the spray paint incident and the confrontation in my driveway. His lawyer tried to argue that he'd just been walking through the neighborhood and stopped to look at my workshop because he was curious about the construction. But the video clearly showed him carrying a spray paint can and approaching with obvious intent. He eventually pleaded guilty to attempted vandalism and trespassing in September and was sentenced to 300 hours of community service and 2 years probation. He also had to pay restitution for the damage to my workshop from the first incident, which came to $1,200 for the siding I'd had to replace. Life slowly returned to normal. I used my workshop regularly, building a bookshelf for my living room, a coffee table, and various other projects. Every time I walked out there, I felt a sense of satisfaction. I'd stood up for my rights and won. Tom and I became closer friends through the whole ordeal. We started having weekly barbecues in alternating backyards, and he introduced me to some of his other friends in the area. My social life improved significantly. In October, I even started dating someone I met at a woodworking class in Temecula. Rebecca Thompson was a high school art teacher who'd always wanted to learn furniture building. We bonded over joint projects in my workshop, and by November, we were seeing each other regularly. The workshop had become more than just a place to build things. It represented standing up for myself, not backing down when I knew I was right, and creating something meaningful despite opposition. Every pencil mark on the walls, every tool hanging in its place, every sawdust-covered surface reminded me that I'd fought for this space and won. Barbara and Robert Henderson kept to themselves after everything settled. I'd see them occasionally around the neighborhood, and we'd pretend not to notice each other. Their house went up for sale in December. According to Tom, they were moving to Arizona to be closer to their daughter. The new HOA administration was dramatically different. Patricia Wilson sent out a revised architectural review policy in November that clearly defined what required approval and what didn't. Accessory structures under 120 square feet were explicitly exempt from review requirements. I like to think my case had something to do with that change. Derek and I stayed friends. We'd meet for lunch occasionally, and he'd update me on other cases he was working on. He told me that the HOA had completely revamped their legal strategy after our case, bringing in new counsel who specialized in HOA law and advising them to focus on actual community issues rather than petty enforcement actions. By the end of the year, I'd accumulated over $3,000 in attorney fees reimbursed from the settlement, the vandalism restitution, and a small claims case I filed for the initial damage that Robert had caused. Combined with not having to pay the bogus HOA fines, I came out roughly even financially. But more importantly, I came out with my rights intact and my workshop still standing. On December 31st, I threw a New Year's Eve party at my house. Tom came, obviously, along with Rebecca and about a dozen other friends I'd made over the past year. At one point, someone asked about the workshop, and I told the whole story. Everyone was amazed at how far the HOA had tried to go. "I can't believe they kept fighting even after code enforcement cleared you," Rebecca said. She was leaning against me on the couch, a glass of wine in her hand. "That's such an abuse of power." "Some people just can't stand being told they're wrong," Tom added. Barbara Henderson was one of those people. As midnight approached, we all gathered on my back patio. The workshop stood in the corner of my yard, illuminated by the security lights I'd installed during the dispute. It looked solid and permanent, exactly as I'd built it. When the countdown reached 0 and everyone shouted, "Happy New Year," I found myself looking at that workshop and feeling genuinely happy. It had been a difficult year in many ways, but I'd come through it stronger and more confident. I'd learned that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it's expensive and stressful and would be easier to just give in. The workshop was more than a building now. It was a symbol of perseverance and principle. And every time I worked in there, building something new with my hands, I remembered what it took to protect that space and that freedom. A few weeks into January, I received one final piece of mail related to the whole situation. It was a check from Robert Henderson's insurance company for an additional $800, covering the full replacement cost of the damaged siding, plus the time I'd spent removing spray paint and restaining. Apparently, his homeowner's insurance had finally settled the property damage claim. I deposited the check and used the money to buy a new table saw I'd been eyeing for months. It was a beautiful piece of machinery, heavy and precise, exactly what I needed for the furniture projects I had planned. Rebecca helped me set it up in the workshop one Saturday in late January. We spent the afternoon organizing tools and planning our next project together. She wanted to build a bench for her classroom, something sturdy that could hold art supplies and provide seating for students. "You think we can build it in here?" she asked, measuring the space. "Absolutely. We've got everything we need." As we worked, I thought about how much had changed since I'd first started building this workshop almost a year ago. I'd been recently divorced, somewhat isolated and just looking for a hobby space. Now I had a community of friends, a girlfriend who shared my interests, and a hard-won sense of justice. The workshop had been worth every bit of trouble it caused. Over the next few months, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Work was going well. My relationship with Rebecca was developing nicely. The new HOA administration was reasonable and responsive. I'd even received an apology from one of the other board members who'd served under Barbara, saying she'd felt pressured to support enforcement actions she didn't agree with. In March, exactly 1 year after the whole situation started, Tom and I stood in my backyard with beers, looking at the workshop. "Can you believe it's been a year?" Tom asked. "Feels longer. Feels like it happened to someone else." "You handled it well." "A lot of people would have just paid the fine and moved on." "I thought about it," I admitted. would have been easier in some ways, but then they'd keep doing it to other people. You changed how the whole HOA operates. That matters." He was right. The new architectural review policy had already helped several other homeowners who'd been planning similar projects. One of my neighbors 3 houses down had built a greenhouse using the new guidelines, and it went through without any problems. Another had added a storage shed. The whole neighborhood felt different now, more relaxed, and less like we were all waiting to get in trouble for minor infractions. I finished my beer and looked at the workshop one more time. The cedar siding had weathered nicely over the past year, taking on a rich patina that looked even better than the original stain. The roof was solid, the foundation was level, and everything inside was exactly as I designed it. "You know what?" I said to Tom. "I'm glad Barbara called code enforcement. I'm glad she fought me on this." Tom laughed. "Really?" "Yeah, because otherwise I would have built my workshop and never thought twice about it. But going through all that, fighting for it, standing up for my rights, that meant something. It taught me something about myself." "What's that?" "That I'm not going to be pushed around, that I can fight back when I need to. That's worth knowing." Tom raised his empty beer bottle in a mock toast to standing up for yourself, to workshops and property rights and reasonable HOA policies, I added. We laughed and headed back inside. That evening, I worked on Rebecca's classroom bench until well after dark. The table saw hummed smoothly as I cut pieces to exact specifications. The wood smelled fresh and clean. My hands moved with practiced confidence through each step of the process. This was why I'd built the workshop in the first place. Not to make a political statement or fight with the HOA, but simply to have a space where I could create things. The fact that I'd had to fight for that space only made it more valuable. I thought about Barbara Henderson sometimes, wondered if she'd learned anything from the experience or if she still thought she'd been in the right. Probably the latter. People like that rarely change. But at least she couldn't hurt anyone else with her petty power trips anymore. The workshop stood solid and true, exactly 119 square feet of complete legality and hard-won victory. Every time I unlocked the door and stepped inside, I felt that victory fresh. It never got old. And that's the thing about standing up for yourself. The wins might be small in the grand scheme of things. A workshop is just a building. An HOA dispute is just a dispute. But the principle matters. The precedent matters. The lesson matters. I'd learned that I could fight back. I'd learned that the law was on my side when I was right. I'd learned that persistence pays off and bullies eventually back down when confronted with someone who won't fold. Those were good lessons. Valuable lessons. The kind that serve you well for the rest of your life. The workshop had cost me time, money, and stress. But it had also given me confidence, friends, and ultimately justice. That was a trade I'd make again in a heartbeat. As I finished the last cut on Rebecca's bench and turned off the saw, I looked around the workshop with satisfaction. This was my space. I'd built it with my own hands. I'd defended it through legal battles and confrontations. And now it was truly, completely, legally, and officially mine. No one could take that away from me. No HOA president, no vindictive neighbor, no arbitrary fine or threatening letter. This workshop was here to stay, and so was I. That felt good. That felt right. That felt like exactly the way things should be.